Sometimes when you are on a language learning plateau and you're struggling to remember all of those words, you just need a few different things to kind of help you out.
So today we have collected a list of 10 of our favorite vocabulary learning methods that we use in combination and we rotate through in order to learn vocabulary.
Let's talk about it.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Waggle Friends English. Let's get into these vocabulary learning methods so that you have some tools to rotate through and just really learn these words.
Number one is you should choose words that are within a certain context. Don't choose words at random. Don't pick them from a hat. Don't just go through the dictionary in alphabetical order. Try to get a context that is actually around you and start to dive into those words, because unless you hear it again, you're probably not going to remember it.
So this could be like an article or a video and a topic that you're interested in, or just something that you happen to be reading, and you can find several words inside of that. The good thing is, and we talk about this a lot, but vocabulary gets its meaning a lot from the context that it appears in. That doesn't mean you're not going to find that same word in a different context and it means something slightly different. So one of the ways that you can be working on and building these is by building an advanced synonym network, which we talk about in this video here. And we have a guide to download there and everything. We highly encourage you to check it out.
But the main thing with this one is the words have to be relevant to you. If you don't interact with them on a regular basis or at all, please don't learn them. Number two is learn vocabulary within their collocations. So we did a whole video about collocations, which you can check out up here. But the big thing is with a new vocabulary word is that if you learn it in isolation, you miss a lot of the ties that we make in our own English-speaking mind. So it's like using Lego blocks, right? You can use little tiny Lego blocks, but it's a lot easier if you chunk them together into bigger chunks and then stick those chunks together.
There is a language learning method out there that's built on this whole idea. We don't suggest doing that all the time. It's something that you'll end up using those bigger chunks in weird context, which is not appropriate, but it is helpful for learning how to use the word and how to get an ear for the word, how to use it in your inner voice in order to just put them together.
Number three is visualize the word using pictures or sketches or illustrations, just something where it's more visual oriented. Mm-hmm. Because if you are just letting this word be a combination of seemingly random letters smushed together, then it's going to be hard to recall that. But if you picture it as an image, then it's going to be a lot easier to think about the image and then recall that back to the word and the spelling and all that stuff. But start by trying to think about this new word as a picture.
One way that you can do this is by finding an idiom that uses that word. Idioms are great because they're pictures. They paint a picture in your mind, and that's what we're looking for. We're not talking about literally sketching pictures unless you just have that time. But we mean like see something in your mind when you use this word. Some people, they will actually spell the word in their mind. They actually see the word in their mind's eye. Other people, they see a picture, they attach it to a memory, or they attach it to some action where they saw it, or in a context in which they heard that word first, or where they often hear that word. Anything you can do to get your mind to tie an image to the word, the more likely you are to remember it.
A word of caution here, though, is try not to always tie them back to your own culture, because when we use these words, we're normally using it in reference to our culture. Mm-hmm. So if we're making, for example, a baseball reference, and if baseball's not big in your country, you might use another sports reference in order to kind of tie it in, but it's going to be awkward. So try to make sure that when you're trying to tie these words back to the images that maybe they could convey, make sure that you try to go for as native example as possible.
Number 4 is to create funny ways to remember these words and how to spell them. English spelling is outrageous. There's a long history behind it. There are good reasons for why our language is the way it is and why we spell it the way we do. But this means you kind of have to rely on silly things to remember how to spell something. One example is island, which an island is land.
Ooh, I see what you did there.
It's a great way to remember that there's a silent S there. Debt, for example, has a B in there. So you could say debit. You could say it wrongly in your mind in order to remember that there is a silent letter in there. The trick is separating the sounds that you make in your mind to help you remember how to spell, separating that from what you actually say. But as you practice this and go back and forth, you will remember it. But you could do anything. You could say funny things, a funny rhyme, whatever it is.
And actually, a lot of people, a lot of native speakers, this is how they learn how to spell difficult words. Just because that's what you do when you're a kid. You always make a mistake, and then maybe somebody makes a joke, and for the rest of your life, you spell parallel correctly because somebody made fun of you in math class.
Number 5 is to use your inner voice. Okay, you want to be thinking with this new term and any other new terms that you worked on in the same context ideally, and you need to work on dwelling or meditating on that context and use the words as you think in your mind. You can also do this by walking around and speaking as well. That would be the next step, but I would start by focusing in your mind on getting yourself to say it right. Think about it, talk about it to yourself in your mind about whatever the context is. What are your opinions on it? What did you think about it? What did you learn about it? And try to use those new vocabulary. If you can get your inner voice to do the right thing, it's far easier to get your mouth to follow.
Number 6 is study the etymology of the word. Etymology is a big word, but all it means is that these words have history. And so if you study the history of the word, you're more likely to get those memory hooks that really help you create these pictures to help you remember it better. And there are some words in English that actually have a fascinating history to the point where there's a really good reason why we say this word this way, why we spell this word this way. And you never realize that until you go into the history of the word.
Yes. So whether it's something that we've demoted to slang or informal language these days, or we've altered slightly in meaning to make it a little less crass or a little more formal, whatever it is, words have a trajectory in every language. And so if you're learning a little bit about the history, you're also learning about the culture behind the language. You're learning about the way that we actually think about the words. Now, we don't all know the etymology of every word. That's not what I'm saying. But there are these little tidbits here that'll help connect the dots, and it's going to help you paint a fuller picture and also understand the way the word has evolved and changed and the way that we're using it in conjunction to how it was used. Now, we're not saying you have to go and memorize Middle English or Old English. That's not at all what we mean. What we mean, though, is there is a difference from context to context. And the more that you're willing to look into it, the more you're going to learn and the more you'll have for your mind to really latch on to remember for the long term.
Number 7 is play word games. There's a lot of people that love games like Scrabble or crosswords or search and finds or unscramble. There's a website out there called Quizlet, and it actually does a lot of this for you. You can make your own decks. You can practice flashcards. You can also use the game mode and help you kind of make the flashcards a little bit more fun than swipe, 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 swipe. The idea with making these fun is that you engage again, another different part of your brain. Not the part that says, I have to study these vocabulary words, or, I've forgotten so many vocabulary words, but a part that says, I wonder if I can get a high score.
Or just figure out a puzzle. Our minds like to figure things out. It's a great way to practice. And if you're working on trying to solve the answer, the one-word answer, that's a different skill than figuring out how to write something. And that's a different skill than how to explain yourself in person, right? So the more ways that you can engage these words from all these different angles, the more interesting your study routine will be, but also the more likely you are to remember these terms.
Number 8 is write new words. Just write them down. Take a physical pen or pencil and write them on a piece of paper. But I'm not talking about lists. I'm not saying recycle, 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 recycle. We're not talking about that. We're talking about taking words that you're trying to learn and then actually writing them out in example sentences, using proper contextual clues to go with them. But the sheer act of you slowing down and actually putting a pen to a piece of paper really genuinely helps with remembering new vocabulary words.
More than that, put together a story, write a memory, write a letter to somebody, whatever it is, try to use it in language. Now, writing is different than speaking, and you're going to use more proper grammar there than you would in spoken English or naturally spoken English. But the more that you are, again, approaching using that word in a different way, the better. And if you can use it in conjunction with other terms that you've been learning, including some words that you learned back in the past, this is a great way to do spaced repetition as well, which happens to be number 9. Spaced repetition is incredibly important. You need to circle back to old terms, but you need to do it in longer and longer and longer intervals. Your brain is really good at short-term memory. The question is, a year from now, can you remember it? But you've got to work up to that year-long spacing before you come back to a word. Now, ideally, you are learning more words that you will actually use more often than once a year. But once you get to functional fluency and you're trying to get beyond that to where you're not working as hard, but you're able to get this English coming to you very naturally, okay, then you're going to be struggling with finding words that you're going to actually use on a daily basis. You're going to be working on words that you might use once in a blue moon. So in this case, writing and spaced repetition work really, really well, because what you can do is you can artificially create a reason to circle back to those words, those more obscure words you're not going to use all the time.
The last learning method that we have for you guys today is actually produce it out of your mouth. Use it in a conversation, whether that's a conversation with a tutor, whether that's a conversation with a teacher, whether that's just calling somebody on the phone, whether or not that's actually just teaching it to somebody else. You have to be able to actually produce the words that you're learning out of your mouth towards another human being, because just the sheer act of doing that, one, it celebrates that word. It celebrates that you know that word, which is great. We have some students right now that are really working on developing in-depth vocabulary building. And a lot of times, one thing that they will do is they will say, I saw the word, I heard the word. And that's exactly what you guys need to do to others. You need to say, man, I learned this really weird word, or I learned this really unique idiom in American culture, and I want to share that with you.
Theoretically, if you have no English speaker help around you, you have nobody around who's trying to learn English, or you're just an incredibly introverted person, you can set up your phone as a camera looking back at you and speak. And then go back and listen to yourself. Watch yourself as you speak and compare it to something else that you've seen. This could be script. There's a lot of people that use scripts when they learn, and that's okay at the beginning when you're trying to learn, but it's not always great because scripts are edited. They are edited for an effect. They are made for a purpose. They are not really natural English. However, if it gets you speaking, you need to at least be speaking. And you do have to go back and watch and correct your own mistakes. Try to catch your own mistakes. You're not going to catch all of them. And honestly, if you return to it a year from now and you've kept up your English, you're going to look at those same things and say, wow, there's a lot of mistakes I did not realize at that time. Working with a native tutor or a native speaker really does help. It really speeds things up. But if you don't have that, or if you're not able to do that right now, you can at least set up a camera and be working on yourself, quizzing yourself, critiquing yourself. Likewise, if you are going to teach someone else, this is one of the best ways to learn. Being able to teach someone else makes you get extra vigilant about making sure you have it right. You are more likely to look up the etymology of a word if it gives you something that will help that student or that person learn and really understand a term. So anytime you can teach someone else or pass on some knowledge to someone else, that's a great way to produce that language as well.
Guys, that's why we do these videos. It's because we want to help you guys. And so what we do is we utilize all resources available so that we can learn, we can grow, so that you can learn and that you can grow. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.